Hey everybody, it is Friday, March 21st. I'm coming to you from DC here. You're listening to the Mo News podcast. I'm Moshe Wanunu.
And I'm Jill Wagner. This is the place where we bring you just the facts.
And we read all the news and read between the lines so you don't have to. Jill, this is my third visit to Washington in about 2.5 weeks. It turns out there's a lot of news happening down here.
Even I'm tired. How are you handling the the travel?
Usually I take the train. Those of you familiar with the Northeast Corridor. Yesterday I took a plane. It's wild, actually, given how expensive the Amtrak is these days, that it's actually competitively priced with Delta flights. So flew down, important meetings for us at Mo News yesterday at the White House. As we continue to see that the White House, along with all politicians on both sides, continue to embrace creators, news influencers, new media accounts. So very excited in the weeks and months to come to showcase some on-the-ground reporting for all of you. So Jill, I should say this will not be my last trip to Washington anytime soon.
And Moshe, I hope to join you at some point.
We're taking the whole team down here, Jill. Though if you're exhausted by my travels, I don't know how you're going to be able to make it on your own.
I sometimes look back on the years that I did overnight shifts as a reporter and think, how did I do it?
how did I work from 9 p.m. to 7 a.m.? I mean, those of you who do it, who are doctors who do it, I mean, there's a number of people who do it, various professions. And Jill, I should say this, in journalism, we're not saving any lives compared to some of the people who are doing those overnights and literally keeping people alive. We're just keeping people awake.
We're keeping people informed.
And informed. And I guess information is very valuable and in some cases can keep you alive. So not to completely diminish what we do, but I just want to ensure that the doctors out there know that we know we're not literally saving lives like you guys and first responders and some of the people who are working those overnight shifts.
I feel like you think we're going to get hate mail over this. I don't think so. I feel like everyone knows we're appreciative of what they do, and we don't think that this is more important than it is.
I just wanted to make sure they knew, Jill.
In case it wasn't clear, no.
As I sit here late on a Thursday as we record this, and I drink my second Modelo of the evening.
Okay, this is going to be a fun one.
This is going to be a good one, guys.
All right, let's get to the headlines here. President Trump signs an executive order to start the process of dismantling the Department of Education. What exactly that means for the nation's kids and the reaction from Republicans and Democrats.
And we do a bit of a trip down memory lane to give you a sense of the history here of the Federal Department of Education and why there's been this effort to take it apart.
To the war in Ukraine, President Trump has proposed that the United States own a Ukrainian nuclear power plant, the biggest in Europe. To business news, home sales unexpectedly show some signs of life. Why economists think that sales rose in February. Those two astronauts who went to space for 8 days and wound up spending 9 months there, well, it turns out that they don't get any overtime pay. We'll break down the numbers.
Yeah, this is a fun one.
A new ranking of the world's happiest countries, who's on top, and how the U.S. did. How to fix a pothole the British way. Public shaming. And it is Friday. Cheers to the freaking weekend. What we are watching, reading, and eating.
Jill, already some upsets early in the NCAA tournament. I know a bunch of you will be watching it as well with us this weekend.
All right, President Trump signed an executive order aimed at closing the Federal Department of Education. That executive order instructs the Education Secretary, Linda McMahon, to begin dismantling the agency. We should mention the department cannot be closed without the approval of Congress, which created it. But the administration can make major changes and cuts short of a total closure. We'll have more on that in a minute. Moshe, you were in Washington, D.C. in the East Room for the signing of the executive order on Thursday. Here is a bit of what President Trump had to say.
We're going to shut it down and shut it down as quickly as possible. It's doing us no good. We want to return our students to the states where just some of the governors here are so happy about this. They want education to come back to them, to come back to the states, and they're going to do a phenomenal job.
Republicans have felt for decades that the department is unnecessary and ineffective. They've been trying to dismantle it since it was created in 1979. Moshe, the governors of Florida, Ohio, Texas, and other states were in the room, as were some students sitting in desks. So give us some color about what was actually happening there. The president said this has been 45 years in the making. What is it about the Department of Education that would otherwise seem pretty innocuous that really bothers President Trump and some Republicans?
Yeah, you mentioned there 1979, key year there. The inception of the Department of Education was actually a part of a campaign promise by Jimmy Carter. It was all politics. He wanted to win over the National Education Association, the nation's largest teachers union. And so he felt that acknowledging the importance there was super important. And so it was actually his attempt to try to win the 1980 election, to try to win re-election, the creation here of the Department of Education. At the time, the federal government had various offices related to education in the Department of Commerce, in the Department of Health and Human Services, and he thought merging them all together and creating a new department would help win him an election, but also acknowledge the fact that education is super important and potentially make some things more efficient, as well as winning some votes there. Now, of course, that did not work out for him electorally. He would go down to defeat there from Ronald Reagan, but the department was there, and starting with Reagan there, Republicans were like, what is this? What is the purpose of this? Because the way that education works in this country is, for the most part, funding, curriculum, major decisions are made at a local and state level. So at the Federal Department of Education, it is the smallest of the departments, but still is a multi-billion-dollar department, which had until recently 4,000 employees. It contributes about 10% of K through 12 funding, but it plays a key role increasingly in distributing federal funds, enforcing civil rights laws, conducting educational research. But for Republicans, the way they view it is they think that ultimately it has not contributed to better results, test results, for students over the course of the past few decades. And they believe that that money would be better served on a local level, as opposed to folks in Washington who are doing research and reports, but also enforcing laws. And, Democrats will argue here, they're concerned about what happens with some of that. They also implement the student loan program. They handle programs related to impoverished, low income students. But the Republican argument is that's not necessary. Let's use that money and distribute it out and let the states and locals make their decisions on all of that. One argument you often hear from Republicans, Jill, is that the median salary of a federal Department of Education employee is double that of a teacher. So they're like, why these very well-paid folks in Washington? Now, Democrats would argue that the federal Department of Education, and by the way, some Republicans would argue this too, serves a key role in enforcing civil rights laws, being a place that people can file complaints related to their kids or kids they know not having the services that they need, that it does handle testing, it handles centralized research, so we have a sense of how things are going in the country, in addition to loan programs and other various programs that the department has implemented here. But nonetheless, Trump is making his best attempt here at dismantling the department. Now, you mentioned you need Congress. Congress created the Department of Education, so Congress needs to dismantle the Department of Education. But in the interim, Trump has seen that, don't let that be the end of the story. He certainly let that be the end of the story last time. Other Republicans have. They're going to make their best attempt to dismantle parts of it in the interim, even if they can't dismantle the whole thing. So you've already seen that they've made various offers that have led to nearly half the department's employees leaving, taking deals to leave, or losing their jobs. They've also made some significant cuts there in a number of parts of the department, including the Office of Civil Rights, which enforces the country's guarantee that all students have equal opportunity to education. So that in particular is something that you're hearing from critics of this move here. But Republicans say, again, back to the Republican side of this, the Trump side of this, the department pushes, they believe, a progressive agenda. It's a bloated bureaucracy. It has failed to improve reading and math scores compared to other developed countries. And so they're like, what's the point here in this federal department that we spend billions of dollars on if they're not actually improving test scores? So we shall see what happens here. George W. Bush was the last president who sort of invoked the criticism here on the Republican side of the Department of Education, but he didn't go so far as actually to dismantle it, but he did push the No Child Left Behind program that tried to streamline things. But the Department of Education has really come under even more scrutiny out of COVID, where parents started to push back on school closures and the like. And now you've had the recent push on the Republican side against diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. And so Republicans, particularly the Trump administration here, feeling like this department has been among those pushing DEI. They're very anti-DEI. And so part of what you saw yesterday was symbolic, part of it practical, but part of it also acknowledging that at the end of the day, they do certain things at the Department of Education, Pell Grants, Title I funding for low-income students, and there are going to be certain aspects of this department that, regardless of what they try to cut, are mandated to be conducted by law, and that no other department can manage right now. So while he signed it away, officially, it's not going anywhere for a while.
Yeah, Trump acknowledged that this issue might come before lawmakers. And shortly after the signing, Senator Bill Cassidy, who is a Republican from Louisiana, announced that he's going to be introducing legislation to shut the department down. Realistically, though, Trump does not have the congressional votes and a filibuster-proof supermajority of 60 votes in the Senate to officially eliminate the agency. But as we were mentioning, even if Congress does not act, Linda McMahon can still implement some really big changes to reduce staffing and programs. The Education Department has thousands of employees and a budget of about $240 billion every year. She's already made moves to cut about half of the staff. And no surprise, Democrats say that these changes are really going to hurt students. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, who was Kamala Harris's running mate, wrote on X that this will have devastating consequences. Nearly 1 million K-12 students in Minnesota rely on funding from the Department of Education. Students in rural communities, low-income families, and those who need special education services will be hit the hardest.
Yeah, the argument you hear from the critics of this say that the Federal Department of Education fills the gaps. The way that we fund schools in this country is through, various districts, through your property taxes. And there are certain areas that just not enough of a tax base in order to be able to fund the schools in their community. And so with these massive cuts to the federal department, there is concern about all of that. Also, student loans, if you're already dealing with delays, the fact that more staff is getting cut, how much longer will the delays be? Now, the Republicans argue that they're trying to make things more efficient, right? The whole DOGE argument. So this is something we're going to have to watch here in terms of the practical impact of these moves by the Trump administration and what it means to the people who depend on the Department of Education for various things. As far as where these things are located and the whole taking it apart, keep in mind the government has evolved over time, right? Like I remember being in DC during the time the Department of Homeland Security was getting created. That didn't exist before 9/11. They created it by moving parts of other agencies, right? ICE, Customs and Border Patrol, Secret Service, all come under the new roof of the Department of Homeland Security. Now, what they're thinking about at education is the opposite, which is taking the whole thing apart, moving disability programs to Health and Human Services, moving civil rights enforcement to the Justice Department, moving student loans to the Treasury Department. Now, some of those departments don't really want to take on new things. As in the same way with DHS, you saw many departments didn't want to leave certain things. Change is hard. So we shall see what happens with all of this, the impact here of these cuts, of less staffing, what practical impact will have on the schools will, it ultimately show us that the argument the administration is making here is legitimate, that test scores will go up with decentralization of things. Will more funding go to locals? Or will people see more delays? Will people who have disability claims, civil rights claims, have more difficulty getting those processed and getting those heard? Nonetheless, we, again, reinforce that 90% of K-12 funding comes through the states already, but the feds have some major responsibilities. And you did hear from White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt yesterday, who said that a shrunken education department will still handle the vital things, including those student loan programs that many of us used. I received a Pell Grant. I filled out those FAFSAs and ensuring that I think the number is 40 million Americans who currently have federal student loans who are either active students or who are still paying them back.
By the way, I also just want to mention that polls before this executive order was signed on Thursday showed that shutting the Department of Ed was pretty unpopular. About 2/3 of Americans who were polled in the past month say that they oppose the idea.
Yeah, so the government, the White House here will have to sell it, and then we'll see its practical impact in the months and more likely years to come.
Time for the speed read from The Guardian. President Trump told Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky this week that the U.S. should own and run Ukrainian nuclear power plants as part of a ceasefire. The Ukrainian president said following their call that, quote, "We talked only about one power plant, which is under Russian occupation." He was referring to Zaporizhzhia, which is Europe's largest nuclear power station. The White House said that it had moved beyond the idea of taking possession of Ukraine's mineral wealth as part of negotiations. That power station is Europe's largest. It was captured by Russian forces early in their invasion in February of 22, and it has since been a flashpoint of concern over a possible nuclear incident.
Yeah, so what's happening here? The negotiations are taking place between Russia and Ukraine. Trump is looking for creative solutions to resolve the war, but also ensure that he feels that the U.S. is getting its bang for its buck after nearly $200 billion in aid that's been given to the Ukrainians after the last few years of military and economic aid. So what is he proposing here beyond the minerals agreement, having U.S. access to Ukrainian minerals, but getting the U.S. involved in the power stations? Now, the Ukrainians have 4 major nuclear power plants, 3 of them still under Ukrainian control, and the Zaporizhzhia, the biggest one that can power much of Europe, now under Russian control. It's not clear whether Putin wants to give that up. So that's where Trump is trying to come up with a creative solution here, saying, how about we take control of it? Zelensky very reluctant on this, saying, this is a way we make money here in Ukraine. But Trump looking at a different potential solution here. A U.S. company called Westinghouse has been involved here with power supply. And so interesting sort of conversation happening here. This was part of Trump's conversation with Zelensky earlier this week. That was their first conversation since the Oval Office blowout a few weeks ago. I think this one also appears to have taken Zelensky partially by surprise, sort of out of left field. But ultimately here, Trump throwing some things out there in terms of private-public partnerships, the nuclear power plant, and what, could be a complex arrangement here to try to end this war. And so that's what he's trying to do. The Ukrainian leader, Zelensky, saying, listen, I need some basic security guarantees here. The Europeans are working on a proposal to put in European peacekeepers. Trump says, I don't want U.S. troops there. I don't want them involved at all. But I will, have Americans involved in some of this economic stuff. And that's a security guarantee for all of you. So interesting conversation. We'll keep following.
Some business news from the Wall Street Journal. Home sales rose in February, reflecting an increase in shopping activity and in the number of homes for sale since the start of the year. U.S. existing home sales rose 4.2% in February from the prior month. This is according to the National Association of Realtors. And this was far better than expectations. So what is behind it? Apparently, buyers and sellers are just getting used to the pretty bad home shopping conditions.
The new reality. We're used to it.
Right. Some buyers and sellers who have been waiting for the market to improve are getting used to the current mortgage rates and deciding to make a move anyway. This is according to economists and real estate agents. Many of these moves are spurred by life events like having a baby, getting a divorce, or relocating for a new job. One real estate agent telling the Wall Street Journal, the shock is gone. People are coming to realize that mortgage rates are going to be between 6 and 7%. And this is exactly where we are right now. So, Moshe, I guess a lot of those people who had just been waiting, their life has dictated otherwise.
Yeah. I mean, we've told you on this podcast, the days of 2.5% 30-year mortgage rates, bye-bye. I mean, maybe we'll get back to 4%, probably more like 5%. So people have been waiting it out. But now life has changed. You've had kids, the kids grow up, you've gotten divorced, people have died, you've got new jobs. There's a whole, reality that's been reinforced here. So ultimately people are like, you know what? I'm going to have to give up my 2.5% mortgage and just take on a 6%, a 7%. I guess that's just the reality that we're in today. So that's what they believe is slightly behind this. Buyers still, of course, turned off by high home prices, elevated mortgage rates, rising costs, rising home insurance, rising property taxes. What hasn't gone up recently? Homeowners with low mortgage rates were reluctant to sell, being like, why would I sell my thing and then have to go take on a 6 or 7% mortgage? Nonetheless, this is the reality we're in. People are accepting that reality. We should note that last year, home sales fell to the lowest number since 1995 because people were trying to wait it out. And at this point, it appears they're done waiting and they're just let's just we're going to embrace the new reality.
From the New York Times, if your 8-day work trip was unexpectedly extended by 9 months, you might expect to rack up some overtime pay. Well, not so for Sonny Williams and Butch Wilmore, the NASA astronauts who spent 278 extra days on the International Space Station after their spacecraft malfunctioned. On Tuesday, they splashed down up the Gulf Coast of Florida, ending a saga that had captivated the country since last summer. But when it comes to pay, Williams and Wilmore are treated effectively like any other government employee who takes a business trip to the next state over. So, Moshe, that means no overtime, holiday, or weekend pay.
Jill, the headline today, $5 a day. They got $5 extra a day for incidentals because it turns out they didn't need to book a hotel room. They didn't need to pay for meals. They were all available on the space station. So what does that mean? Well, first of all, the salaries they receive is sort of the higher end of U.S. government. They each receive about $150,000 a year. But again, they were supposed to be there for 8 days, and they were there for 278 extra days at $5 a day. Each of them earned $1,430 for their extra days in space. Do you want it in cash or check? But we will tax you on it. You know, the government knows. Like, what did you expense up there? There wasn't even a candy machine to buy stuff in. You know, the meals are prepackaged and you wore the, same clothing the entire time.
They did probably save a lot of money. Not to say that this was right, that they didn't get like a huge bonus or overtime.
Said like a good boss, we saved you money by keeping you in space for 9 months.
But they did have zero costs, right? Yeah. I feel like just living costs me so much money between food shopping and just everything. Anytime I leave the house or don't, or just like pick up my phone.
Well, I will say this. They can also use their quotes against them. So Williams apparently at times referred to space as my happy place. I love being up here in space. It's just fun, So, there is that. But I do think that they deserve something. Chill, $5 a day for their extra 9 months of space. Like, I feel like at least a free trip to Disney World, like the athletes get when they win a championship.
I don't think their story is fully written yet. In fact, as I say that, they'll probably write a book, as they should.
Right. They'll have a movie made in their lives and a book and all of that. So they probably again, the government's going to be like, you guys will make money off this whole experience. We're not worried about you.
From the Associated Press, Finland is the happiest country in the world for the 8th year in a row, according to the World Happiness Report 2025, which was published Thursday. Other Nordic countries are also once again at the top of the happiness rankings. This is an annual report published by the Wellbeing Research Center at the University of Oxford. Besides Finland, Denmark, Iceland, and Sweden remain the top 4 and are in the same order. Country rankings are based on answers that people give when asked to rate their own lives. This is done in partnership with Gallup polling. The CEO says that, quote, happiness is not just about wealth or growth. It is about trust, connection, and knowing that people have your back. If we want stronger communities and economies, we must invest in what truly matters, each other.
So researchers say that beyond health and wealth, a number of factors that influence happiness, not surprising, are actually pretty simple. Sharing meals with others, having somebody to count on for social support, household size. In Mexico and Europe, for example, a household size of 4 to 5 people predicts the highest level of happiness. Believing in the kindness of others is also much more closely aligned and tied to happiness than previously thought. As an example, the report suggests that people who believe that others are willing to return their lost wallet is a strong predictor of overall happiness in a population. Jill, I will say this. Countries like Finland, Denmark, Iceland, Sweden, top of the list, much more homogeneous populations, right? And so there's a certain trust there. People all look relatively similar to each other, know each other. And so there's a cultural aspect to that, a trust aspect that certainly reinforces a bit of that.
FYI, I once lost my wallet on the street in New York City, and I got it back.
Well, there you go. That's why, where are we, Jill? We're 24th on the list.
Yeah, the U.S. has fallen to its lowest ever position in the happiness ranking. While European countries dominate the top 20 in the ranking, there were some exceptions. So despite the war with Hamas, Hezbollah, Houthis on all borders, Israel still came in at 8th on the happiness index. Costa Rica and Mexico entered the top 10 for the first time, ranking 6th and 10th, respectively. And when it comes to decreasing happiness or growing unhappiness, the United States has dropped to its lowest ever position at 24, having previously peaked at 11th place in 2012.
Yeah, we never cracked the top 10 there. We were in 11th place. Now we're in 24th place, but it's like 180, 190 countries in the world. So generally speaking, we're still in the top echelon there, but still dropping 24th place. Jill, in particular, it's among younger people. When you actually break down these numbers, it's young Americans, Gen Z Americans, that have the most negative outlook here that sort of bring down our ranking. Older Americans, boomers, Gen Xers, tend to have the highest happiness index when you actually break down the population demographically. We're at 24. The UK is at 23, Germany at 22 on the index. If you're curious as to the most unhappy country in the world, Afghanistan, in particular Afghan women. Think their lives are especially difficult. Jill, we've been covering this, banned from many parts of education, banned from working to pretty extreme extent there. So you got the Afghans in last place, Sierra Leone in West Africa, second unhappiest, Lebanon, massive inflation, war, a lot of issues they've been facing there, also ranking third from the bottom there. But you are seeing this trend line I mentioned, young Americans, but we're seeing this among young adults across the world, that they all feel like they can't count on more social support and tend to have a negative outlook than their older relatives and fellow citizens.
And finally, Moshe, from the Wall Street Journal, it's pothole season, and some Brits have a new idea on how to handle winter's most frustrating roadblock. In the UK, people are turning to humor and public shaming to force repairs on the road, from spray painting lewd images to setting up mini golf courses around potholes. One man and his wife put a pair of jeans and sneakers on two wooden planks and placed them upside down into a pothole, making it look as if someone had actually fallen in head first. The image went viral. And guess what? The pothole was fixed in days. Potholes are a major issue across the UK, causing an estimated $700 million in vehicle damage every year.
Jill, they've gotten creative there in the UK. One guy who has become known as Mr. Pothole has spent over a decade fighting for fixes, even driving a bright orange armored vehicle through London to urge the government to declare a war on potholes. Rod Stewart, Rod Stewart, the musician, he's even gotten in on the fight in the UK, said he's considered selling his collection of Ferraris because potholes have made it nearly impossible to drive them. Rod Stewart, just like us. Ugh, why can't I even own these Ferraris? I can't drive them around because of these potholes. So frustrating. Jill, I know you know the feeling.
Can't totally relate about the Ferrari. However, Long Island's potholes and just New York City's roads are awful.
It's the reason why you haven't bought a Ferrari.
Yes, that is correct.
Yeah. So apparently in 2022.
The only reason.
Jill's always talking. She's like, Moshe, I really want to buy that Ferrari, but there's just too many potholes. Rod Stewart, I hear you. Apparently Rod Stewart a couple of years ago started filling in the potholes himself in his neighborhood. So among other things, he could drive his Ferrari. You get the point. By the way, that's the UK. In the US, obviously, we, as Jill mentioned, we have our own pothole issues. 1 in 10 drivers in the US has experienced needing to pay for car repairs due to pothole damage. According to AAA, the damage every year to American motorists, $3 billion. And that's if you're driving a car. If you're driving a bike, you might break your leg.
Watch out for that first step. It's a doozy.
There you go.
It is Friday, everybody. Cheers to the freaking weekend. Time for what we are watching, reading, and eating. Moshe, I could guess what you were watching, but I will ask, what are you watching?
Jill, watching NCAA basketball today and throughout the weekend is those like fun moments where you can have multiple screens on, multiple games going on. As we record this, I feel pretty good about my prediction. I have a Duke Michigan State final. They're both still in it as of the first few hours of the tournament, but as we know, a lot of upsets to come. But I will say this: feel good about my calling Creighton over at 9/8. That's not a big upset. But McNeese beating Clemson. I don't know if any of you were following that. Feel bad for my Tiger fan friends, but we had our first major upset as we record this on Thursday night.
Moshe, I just checked my brackets, and I clearly made a very big mistake by allowing AI to pick my bracket. And Moshe, yes, I went with Kansas, which they had winning the whole thing. So Kansas is already out. Kansas lost in the first round. So my bracket is busted.
So Jill, beyond basketball, what are you watching?
Okay, so the movie Sing Sing, which was nominated for an Oscar this year, it's now on Max. I am going to be watching that. It's based on the Real Life Rehabilitation Through Arts program, or the RTA program, at the Sing Sing Maximum Security Prison in New York. So again, that is on Max. And Moana 2 came out, I think, last week on Disney Plus, and we've already watched it a few times, and I have a feeling we will be watching it again this weekend. Moshe, what are you reading?
So I don't know if other people have this complaint, but the Wall Street Journal is onto the story. The headline: car makers are reinventing the gear shifter and drivers are lost. So some new cars, you knew where to shift the gear, drive, reverse, park, was for many years, either in the center console or like behind the steering wheel. And now they're creating these like unnecessarily creative solutions to go from like drive to reverse. And I often deal with this when we have to rent a car on a trip. And I'm like, how the hell do I put the car into park? How do I take it into drive? And it's like, I feel like it's people are solving for a problem that's not a problem. They're creating a solution for not a problem. Like, just keep it simple. This is a super important thing. Neutral, drive, park, reverse. Make it simple. Make it difficult for your kid or your dog to shift the gear on you. And so the Wall Street Journal getting at that in a new article. We'll link to it in the show notes.
Imagine being a valet.
Yeah, valets probably know the pain the most. Talk to a valet. Be like, what is the weirdest gear shift you've seen recently? Because it seems like every manufacturer is like, how can we make this even more difficult for the consumer? Jill, what are you reading?
Dream Girl Drama. It is a novel by Tessa Bailey, who's actually a Long Islander. It's a new rom-com, but there is a new Barnes & Noble that's opening up on Long Island, and she's going to be there signing books. So I figure I may as well try to read it. It looks super easy and fun. And to my favorite section here, what are you eating, Moshe?
So I come to you from my friend Shane's home in D.C. His daughter is selling Girl Scout cookies, so I'm eating Tagalongs, care of Ansel, his daughter.
It's hard to top a good Girl Scout cookie, Moshe. I am going to be attempting to make homemade strawberry ice cream. For some reason, these kept popping up on my Instagram feed, and they seem really easy. 3 ingredients.
Wait, you're going to make your own ice cream?
Yes, apparently just strawberries, a little coconut water or coconut milk, and honey.
All right. Jill, Godspeed.
Wish me luck.
I'm sure it's going to be amazing on the first try.
I did buy a carton of strawberries, organic, for $7 the other day, and I don't know if I have it in me to use that for this experiment. So I think I may go
savor
and buy,
those strawberries.
I think I might go and buy frozen strawberries.
I hear you.
The struggle is real. All right, everyone. Thank you for listening to the Mo News Podcast. If you like what you hear, share this with your friends. It helps us grow. Follow us and subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and review us in the App Store.
See you guys on Monday.
Thanks for listening to the Mo News Podcast. Have a fantastic day. I hope you enjoyed.
That's if you're driving a car. If you're driving a bike, you might break your leg.
All right, let's...